here. I know most of them. Esteemed delegates, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset I'd like to congratulate VARINDIA for organizing the Odisha Information Technology Fair 23. It's an exciting event, as I understand. We are in a world where technology is driving our lives. I think the point has been well made by Dr. Rath, my previous speaker. But most important is whether human mind and human intelligence would always lag behind the technological intelligence. Whether we can regulate technology and successful. Whether our regulations would be able to be ahead of the technological evolutions that are taking place in the world. Now these are some of these very crucial questions that has been agitating the minds of all of us, particularly people like us who are in the Parliament legislating on several of the technological laws, state laws, some already done, some in the offing, some which are going to have far-reaching impact on the entire technology ecosystem. I generally look at the impact of technology at three levels. One is the product, how it changes the product, how it makes it better, it makes it more beneficial to the people who are going to use the product, how it's going to deliver more with less cost, probably faster, therefore more efficient, and maybe more impactful. The second level at which technology is impacting are the processes. Now here again, the processes, how reliable they are, how resilient they are, and how impactful they are, how efficient they are. The same three principles of ease apply here. The last and the most important are the people. The level is people, how technology is impacting people. Dr. Rath spoke about science and technology studies, which is in the discipline, which is a separate discipline in the intersection of sociology and technology, which was initiated. There's a founder of this is someone called W.B. Biker, Professor W.B. Biker from Netherlands. I'm not going to get into it. The crux of the thing was that technology affects society as much as society affects technology. It will influence. It's a didactic kind of relationship. But what I am going to speak about in the few minutes that I have is the fact that the impact it has on people, and it includes the changes or the transformation in the workplace. Mind you, now your house is also a part of the digital workplace of the company. You are supposed to be on, as Deepak Babu said, all the time. But in all this, the question that is arising is data. Data, as they say, is the new oil. And I can tell you this, that most of the negotiations in the FTA agreements that India is negotiating currently with the UK or the European Union, and the one they had with Australia and the UAE, had significant and separate portion on data, the cross-border flow of data, how it will be handled. The amount, as all of us know, that AI has a great influence, has a great power to affect our lives, but all the AI would depend on is data. Unless the data is generated in sufficient quantity, the machine wouldn't be able to learn and improve its models. So AI's success would depend on data. The success of the innovation ecosystem would depend on data. The success of global integration would also depend on data. Now, when you have to depend on data, the data has to be generated. If digital data is not generated, or rather the data is not generated in a digital form, the applications of AI would of course not improve, innovations will not take place, our lives would probably not get better. That's on one side of the ecosystem, that's one of the aspects that you have to admit. We all admit that it has great power and it depends on data. But the challenges are much more. And this is where it is very important to, for all of us who are in the technology field to realize and work on. And that is data security. Data security from the perspective of the employer or from the perspective of an IT firm is not as important. I repeat, I'm very careful in using this word, is not as important as protecting the data of the data principals or the people who are sharing the data. It is not really a question of building confidentiality, integrity and availability of data from the point of view of the data users, but it is more important to safeguard the privacy of the data which has been shared by the data principals or the users or the citizens or consumers in an e-commerce platform. Now when we talk about privacy, this is where I think signal contribution has to come from all of us. Not just the people who are innovating, not just the people who are in the business of making regulations, and not just the people who are in the business of making, cross-border data flow easier through agreements and contracts. The most important judgment, as all of us know, the most important event that changed the face of the privacy narrative in this country are those two Supreme Court judgments of the Buddha Swami case, 2015 and 17, which say that data privacy is now a fundamental right, having been read into Article 19 and 21 of the Indian Constitution, which essentially means that it is the Constitution which is now going to safeguard the data of the citizen. It is not the state, neither the central government or the state government. It is the Constitution which is now giving this right to its citizen. So it is bounden duty of all government, central or state, all users of data, whom we call as data fiduciaries like you and I, or the big conglomerates, the MNCs, the countries abroad, they all have to respect this particular fundamental right. And this fundamental right, since it is guaranteed, the entire process of accessing the judicial system to ensure that your privacy is protected has also been given under Article 32. Now when I talk about privacy, therefore, the 5 basic principles which all of us know, which have been set up, which have been laid down well in that judgment of about 1,000 pages. I talked to Justice Sikri, who was a member of the that particular bench which delivered the final judgment on what the data privacy ecosystem should look like. Most important is purpose limitation. And this is where I have seen that most of us really are lax. Why you are collecting a data from certain principle, from certain data principle, has to be known to you very clearly, communicated to the person who is sharing the data very, very carefully and very, very clearly. And the data principle retains the right to withdraw that particular sharing of data, that data which he has shared at any point of time, because it's a fundamental right. So if you develop your systems, or you develop an ecosystem, including the workplace ecosystem, where the purpose is not well defined and the purpose is not communicated to the data principle, processing of data, collection of the data, storage of data is actually a great risk. So the data, you'll find some of my articles coming in the next few weeks on the data privacy. I have written substantially on this before, based on the previous law that we had, previous bill that we had introduced in the Parliament, that had been introduced by the government in the Parliament, and which has been withdrawn and a new law has been put in, and my comments on that. But I could share some of this here to say that the most important thing are the guiding principle for designing any ecosystem in the technology space has to be, it's important for all of us, is purpose limitation, storage limitation, collection limitation, data minimization, accountability, and quality. So we say, I am a great votary of saying that privacy by design has to be the benchmark with which you should develop your products and services for citizens. Otherwise, there would be situations in which an Elon Musk kind of a company would actually be facing or falling foul of the legislation in India. Because India is one country where it has been interpreted as not just a statutory right given by the Parliament, but now it has been interpreted as a part of the Constitution itself, as a part of the fundamental right. No one can take it away by way of legislation. So privacy by design is something which I wanted to speak here, is something that you have to keep in mind. All these principles have to be kept while collecting data, developing your AI algorithms. And mind you here, I am again one who has been pushing for registration of algorithms and some kind of regulation on the field of AI regulations, AI algorithms. And we may reach it. EU is already doing it. We might be also heading towards particular direction. I keep talking to Mr. Rajiv Chandrasekhar, the Minister of State for IT on these matters, who is also an expert on this. The next point that I want to talk about is the nature of regulation. All of us admit that there is a need for regulation. All of us also admit that regulations shouldn't be so hard and hard-coded that it would kill innovation. Now this is a constant argument I keep hearing from all the big tech companies saying that regulations should be such that it would stymie innovation. I agree. All of us do, because it makes our life better. But as I said, the data principle, and since Dr. Rath talked about the digital divide that we have in our country, in our state, I gave a press conference on the introduction of 5G on similar lines that the distinction, 25% of Odisha do not have access to a smartphone, and about 40% do not have internet quality internet connection. Since we have a situation such as this, the regulation has to be done in such a manner, regulation has to be done in such a manner that it would give scope for innovation, but at the same time should be extremely harsh if a harm is caused to a data principle. Currently, because of the lack of digital literacy, data principals who are sharing data in various platforms, including e-commerce platforms, the situation will not be there for all the time. The literacy will improve. The BharatNet project will start spreading out will cover all the GPs in probably 2 years. That's what the minister has said. So once people have access to this, people will be demanding that if there is a data breach, if a harm has been caused to him, and what is the nature of harm? It need not necessarily be a physical harm. It can be a cognitive harm as well. This is a grey field. The courts have not yet also interpreted the nature of harm. I always think about this. What will be the nature of harm in a digital world? The digital world nature of harm cannot only be interpreted to be physical. It can be mental, it can be cognitive, it can be on your relatives, it can be short-term, long-term. So once this harm has been caused, the penalty for such harm has to be extremely harsh. Now that is the harm model of privacy that the world over is trying to move to, in order to ensure that we do not bring in a lot of regulation front-loaded, so that it would stymie innovation. And therefore, I'll end by saying, by pleading that privacy by design, just as human rights by design in our regulation, has to be in our digital ecosystem. The cost would be something substantial, probably. But more important is the fact of trust. The entire digital ecosystem runs on the element of trust. Trust between the people who are giving up their data and people who are using that data and processing that data to give some kind of benefit to the person who has shared the data. I'm not getting into personal data, non-personal data. Those are again minor categorization of data. How much of non-personal data can be shared and personal cannot be shared. But the point is, in our quest, something which I agree with Dr. Rao, in our quest for making our lives easier, making the ease of doing business better, getting our rankings better in ease of let us say getting industry into any space, we have to remember that the trust between the person who shares the data, I call as the data principal, and the person who is using the data, I call as the data fiduciary. And that could be a bank, that could be a technological e-commerce platform, that could be you and I, that could be a receptionist, that could be a hospital, that could be the railway reservation system collecting information about dates of birth on tickets, which is I really don't know why it is required. So this is the new paradigm that is going to set in. Now why I am confident that is going to set in is because of what is called as cross-border data flow. If you want to get data of other countries to improve your application or do business or send your data to another country, the rule is that it has to be reciprocal. The other countries should also realize or should have confidence and trust on your digital ecosystem. They should believe that the citizens' data, the data of the citizens of that country are safe in your country where it is getting processed. And that can only happen if you have these 5 principles built into your systems and your processes that you are developing. The initial euphoria in having a new unicorn or a new, I have 2-3 minutes. The initial euphoria in having a new unicorn or a new application which improves our lives is laudable, is praiseworthy. We all accept that. But let me tell you that one failure like Cambridge Analytica or profiling, one failure of someone's data being stolen from a social media intermediary platform, they themselves like to be called as intermediaries. There is a doubt, there's a debate on that as well. But suppose that data gets sold elsewhere without the knowledge of the data principal, the enormous amount of harm that can cause to this trust factor that is at the root and the essence of the digital development of a robust digital ecosystem in our country, or for that matter any other country. This trust is also at the root of adoption of technology. Diffusion and adoption of technology, new technology particularly, depends on this increasing trust between the sharers of data and users of the data or the processors of data who are going to process it to give it back to the data principals in some form for improvement in their lives. So the purpose of our regulation has to be to build this fine balance, not to kill innovation, but at the same time ensure that no harm is caused to the data principals. Currently, as we discussed, because of the digital divide, whereas I believe that the divide will probably increase over a period of time, but the lower level of access to technology, access to the digital world will however increase even in rural India. But if the breach of data privacy by a data fiduciary results, let's say, in communal violence, killing of people, starting of a war, aircraft crashing. You can imagine. We only keep hearing about data having been breached of, let's say, Facebook, WhatsApp, but the harm can be of gigantic proportions. Because we are moving to a world in which everything is going to be these data points. So my advice to the gathering here is that the amount, and that is my feeling, after interacting with, you can trust me, I interact with almost all the top big tech firms, both their Indian heads as well as people who come from their global positions that visit me. And having traveled to, some of these countries, I can tell you this much, that the worry now is this, that will it create a situation in which the data principle loses trust in the system, stops sharing any data? Don't we keep on hearing, as many times I keep hearing from members of Parliament that, no, instead of using the smartphone, use the other phone. So there is no question of snooping or surveillance, there will be no question of data sharing, data processing, data stealing. But if that trust is broken, a lot of this innovations will die down. So what appears to you to be an upfront additional cost to development of systems and procedures and processes in the digital space is actually in the long run going to be a more sustainable form of business. Another point which I wanted to make is relating to, I'm not getting into cybersecurity, the extensive topics. One small point is on return on information. We have heard about return on investment. Now the question is return on information. This is not my creation. This is a Harvard Business Review article which I read some time ago when I was there. Now the point is, with data and information explosion taking place, companies will have to decide what is the return on this information. As you can see, since information is in the denominator, if the information requirement is huge too, and the return is same constant, then it is not really worthwhile. And the entire principle of digital ecosystem privacy is based on this, that if you can give the same return by collecting the least information, storing the least information, data minimization, then only your business model becomes successful. The future research in this field would be driven in this direction. But you can also, as I said, and I repeat, that the development of AI, the fourth industrial revolution has ended. Probably it's not ended, probably it's still on in different parts of the world in different ways. In Africa maybe it's at very low level. But the point is, the research will now be driven towards this, that since the harm that can be caused to data principles would invite a stricter regime of penalties, which probably could swap the entire company and make it belly up. It is better to have a system where you build this in initially and maximize your return by minimizing collection and storage of information. It is not just adequate, this is very important. You can always say that I have the firewalls, I have the, my data stored at 5 or 6 places, I have a distributed database system, I adopted a blockchain system in which I have some data that's stored elsewhere, but the point is, once a data breach takes place, it probably could lead to the killing of the innovation. Killing of the innovation itself. And therefore, more research by the technology enthusiasts and evangelists and people like you and I is required in this area, which is currently missing. The important thing to realize is that since technology will always be ahead of regulation at hand because of its evolving nature, it is only through self-regulation that the ecosystem can become robust and evolve in the way that I have described. So it is through self-regulation or self-made architecture that you can build these things into the digital ecosystem. The role of government is not really important. With this, I end my deliberation, some of my thoughts. I would, since this is something which is so dynamic, would invite suggestions from you at any time to my email or to my social media accounts. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Deepak Babu, for inviting me here. It was really great to be here. I've been there in Delhi in one of his VARINDIA national conferences. It was a pleasure to be there. I'm so happy that somebody from Odisha who is trying to take the lead in this. Each one of us can actually take this lead in the country, because Odisha is going to become a technology hub if it has not already become. But it is going to become a technology hub. But if it can also become a leader in developing some of these concepts to become the torch bearer in the country itself, in building how to build privacy by design in your entire digital ecosystem, I think that would be a signal contribution to the country as a whole. With this, I end my speech. Thank you so much.